Marcus Thompson wiped the sweat from his forehead as he watched the sunrise over New Kepler. The planet had been a frozen wasteland just 5 years ago. Now, green grass grew in the valleys, and birds from Earth sang in the morning air. It was another successful terraforming project, another world made ready for life. "The soil readings look perfect," said Dr. Yuki Tanaka, walking up beside him. She carried a tablet full of data about the atmosphere and ground conditions. "The Zilarian colonists can start moving in next month." Marcus smiled. The Zilarians were a quiet people who needed specific humidity levels to survive. Most other species would have given up on this project years ago. The planet was too cold for the Andromedians, too dry for the Aquatic Union, and too unstable for the Elder Council's taste. But humans? Humans could work anywhere. That was what made them special in the galaxy. While other species had evolved on single worlds with perfect conditions, humans came from Earth, a planet that seemed determined to kill them in new ways every day. Ice ages, volcanic explosions, meteor strikes, shifting continents. Humanity had survived it all and learned to adapt. "Another success for the bridge builders," Yuki said, using the nickname other species had given humans. It started as a joke but became something humans wore with pride. Marcus remembered his first diplomatic mission 15 years ago. Two ancient races, the Crystal Hierarchy and the Metal Collective, had been at war for 3,000 years. Their planets were so different that neither species could even breathe the same air. Every attempt at peace talks had failed because they couldn't agree on where to meet. The solution had been simple, at least to human thinking. They met in space on a human ship, with each delegation in their own environment chambers. Marcus had spent weeks learning both cultures, finding the small things they had in common. Both species valued craftsmanship. Both had similar creation myths. Both feared the same ancient space monsters. The peace treaty was signed 6 months later. It held strong even now. That was the thing about humans. They saw connections where others saw only differences. They found hope where others gave up. They asked, "Why not?" when everyone else said, "Impossible." Sarah Chun knew this better than most. As Earth's primary ambassador to the Galactic Council, she had seen humanity's role grow from newcomers to essential partners. She stood now in her office, overlooking the great council chambers on Nexus Prime, reading through the daily reports from human teams across the galaxy. Commander Jake Rodriguez was leading a deep space mission into the Void Sector, where 3 ships from other species had disappeared. Only humans were crazy enough to volunteer for that job, and skilled enough to have a chance of success. Dr. Amara Okafor was managing the trade routes through the Crimson Nebula, where pirates and strange magnetic storms made travel nearly impossible. Her team of human navigators had turned the most dangerous passage in local space into a major trade highway. Captain Leo Wei was mediating another crisis on the border between the Hive Confederation and the Lone Wolf Alliance. 2 species that couldn't be more different. One that valued the group above all else, another that prized individual freedom. War seemed certain until Liu arrived with his team of human negotiators. Sarah's door chimed softly. "Come in," she called. Elder Zix9 of the council glided into her office. The ancient being's crystal body caught the light from the windows, sending rainbow patterns across the walls. Zix9 had been alive for over 800 years and was one of the few Elder Council members who genuinely respected humans. "Another successful mission report from your people," Zix9 said, their voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "The Kepler terraforming project is complete ahead of schedule." "Marcus and his team did excellent work," Sarah replied. "The Zilarians will have a beautiful new home." "Indeed. Your species continues to amaze the galaxy with its adaptability." There was something odd in Zix9's tone, but Sarah couldn't place it. Is everything all right, Elder? Zix9 was quiet for a long moment. There has been discussion in the Elder Chambers. Some of my colleagues believe humans have become too influential in galactic affairs. Sarah felt a cold chill despite the warm office. Too influential? You must understand, Ambassador Chen. For millions of years, the galaxy had order, predictability. Each species knew their role and stayed within it. But humans... Zix9 paused. Humans change things, constantly. They find new solutions to old problems. They make connections that upset ancient balances. I thought that was considered a good thing. By many, yes, but not by all. The elder species of Andromeda Prime believes human unpredictability is dangerous. Elder Quantum 7 of the Machine Collective argues that human emotions make negotiations inefficient. There are others who agree with them. Sarah stood and walked to her window. Below, beings from dozens of species moved through the council plaza. She could see humans among them, some in diplomatic uniforms, others in explorer gear, a few in the simple clothes of traders and teachers. They moved differently than the other species. Less rigid, more open to changing direction when something interesting caught their attention. What kind of discussion, Elder? Sarah asked carefully. The kind that could change everything, Zix9 replied softly. I wanted to warn you, as a friend. There may be difficult times ahead. After Zix9 left, Sarah sat alone in her office as the artificial day cycle dimmed to evening. She thought about all the human teams scattered across the galaxy. Marcus terraforming impossible worlds. Jake exploring dangerous space. Amara keeping trade flowing through routes others feared to travel. Liu preventing wars between species that had nothing in common, except their hatred for each other. Humans had found their place in the galaxy by being themselves. Adaptable, curious, emotional, unpredictable. They were the species that said, yes, we can try, when others said, no, impossible. They were the ones who saw potential, where others saw only problems. But maybe that was exactly what some people feared. Sarah activated her communication array and sent a coded message to Earth. Not an emergency signal, not yet. Just a warning that storm clouds were gathering in the galactic political landscape. She had no idea how right she was, or how terrible the coming storm would be. The council chambers had never felt so cold. Sarah Chun sat in the human delegation section, watching as elder species of Andromeda Prime rose to address the assembly. The ancient being's form shifted like liquid metal, and when he spoke, his words carried the weight of 10 million years of galactic authority. Fellow beings of the council, elder species began. We gathered today to address a growing concern that threatens the stability our ancestors built over countless ages. Sarah exchanged glances with her aide, David Park. This emergency session had been called with only 12 hours' notice. No agenda, no prior discussion. Just an order for all species representatives to attend. For eons, our galaxy has thrived under the principle of predictable order, elder species continued. Each species contributes according to their nature. The crystalline hierarchy provides computational power. The Machine Collective offers manufacturing precision. The Aquatic Union manages water world resources. This system has brought peace and prosperity to billions. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Sarah noticed most came from the older, more established species. The newer council members, those who had joined in the last 1,000 years, remained silent. However, elder species' voice grew harder. Recent decades have seen the introduction of chaotic elements into our ordered system. Unpredictable behaviors that disrupt careful balances. Emotional responses that cloud rational decision-making. Adaptive traits that resist proper categorization and control. Sarah's stomach dropped. She knew where this was heading. The species known as humans, Elder Specious said, turning his liquid metal gaze toward the human section, have demonstrated repeatedly that their biological nature is incompatible with galactic order. They refuse to accept established limits. They find solutions where none should exist. They form connections that bypass proper channels. They introduce uncertainty into processes that require precision. Elder Quantum 7 of the Machine Collective rose next. The robot's voice was flat and emotionless. Statistical analysis confirms this assessment. Human involvement in galactic affairs has increased unpredictability by 347%. Diplomatic solutions now take 23% longer to implement due to human insistence on creative alternatives. Trade route efficiency has decreased by 12% as humans discover better ways to do things. David leaned over to whisper in Sarah's ear. Those statistics are meaningless without context. They don't mention that human involvement has also prevented 4 wars and opened 7 new trade corridors. Sarah nodded but kept her expression neutral. She could feel the mood in the chamber shifting. Many of the elder species were nodding in agreement with the speakers. Elder Aqua Prime of the Deep Current spoke next. Her watery form rippled with emotion. The humans disrupted the careful balance between the Hive Confederation and the Lone Wolf Alliance. For 3,000 years, these species maintained proper separation. Human intervention has led to cooperation. This sets a dangerous precedent for other species pairs that should remain apart. Sarah wanted to laugh despite her growing alarm. They were complaining about preventing a war. Finally, Elder Specious rose again. Therefore, the Elder Council has crafted a solution. The Biological Standardization Directive will ensure all species can contribute to galactic civilization without introducing destabilizing factors. A floating screen appeared above the assembly, displaying the text of the directive. Sarah read it with growing horror. The directive required all spacefaring species to undergo genetic optimization to remove chaotic biological traits. The list of traits to be eliminated read like a description of everything that made humans human. Emotional range beyond necessary parameters, adaptive responses that deviated from species norms, and unpredictable decision-making patterns. In simple terms, they wanted to lobotomize humanity. The procedure is safe and reversible, Elder Specious explained. Citizens will retain their memories and basic personalities. They will simply become more efficient, more predictable, better suited to their role in galactic civilization. Sarah stood up. I request permission to address the council. Permission granted, Ambassador Chan. Sarah walked to the center of the chamber, feeling the weight of thousands of alien gazes upon her. She had prepared for many scenarios over her years as ambassador, but not this one. Honored members of the council, she began, her voice clear and steady despite her racing heart. Humanity is grateful for the opportunity to speak on this matter. She paused, looking around the great chamber. Some faces showed curiosity, others hostility. A few showed what might have been sympathy. The directive describes human traits as chaotic and destabilizing. But these same traits are why you asked for our help with problems no one else could solve. You called us adaptable when you needed someone to terraform worlds others couldn't survive. You valued our emotional understanding when ancient enemies needed to find common ground. You praised our unpredictability when we found new solutions to old problems. Elder Specious's form rippled with impatience. And look at the chaos that resulted. Trade routes changed. Diplomatic protocols bypassed. Ancient boundaries crossed. Yes, Sarah said simply. We changed things. That's what you asked us to do. But now you want to change us instead. She activated her personal communicator and projected her own display above the chamber. It showed images from across the galaxy. New Kepler with its green valleys, The Crimson Nebula trade route bustling with ships. Former enemy species working together on joint projects. This is what human chaos looks like, Sarah said. Dead worlds brought to life. Dangerous passages made safe. Ancient hatred replaced with cooperation. You call this destabilizing. We call it progress. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some species shouted in agreement with Sarah. Others demanded she be silenced. Elder Species called for order, his metallic voice cutting through the noise. The decision is made, he declared. All species will comply with the Biological Standardization Directive. The procedures will begin in 30 standard days. Sarah felt a strange calm settle over her. She had hoped for debate, for compromise, for a chance to find middle ground. Instead, the council had made its position perfectly clear. In that case, Sarah said, her voice somehow carrying over the chaos in the chamber. Humanity has a response. The arguments died down as beings focused on her words. We came to the stars in peace, Sarah continued. We served the galaxy in peace. We solved problems and prevented wars and opened new worlds, all in the name of peace. But if peace requires us to become something we are not, if cooperation means surrendering what makes us human, then we must respectfully decline. She straightened her shoulders and looked directly at Elder Species. We will not submit to your directive. We will not be standardized. We will not trade our humanity for your approval. Then you choose exile, Elder Species replied coldly. If that is what it takes to remain ourselves, Sarah said, then yes. We choose exile. The chamber fell silent. Sarah walked back to her delegation and gathered her things. David and the other human representatives followed her lead. They moved with dignity, showing no rush or panic, just quiet determination. At the chamber doors, Sarah turned back one final time. The galaxy is vast, she said. There's room for all kinds of beings among the stars. We had hoped to share it with you as partners. Instead, we'll explore it alone, as we did before we met you. She paused, her next words carrying clearly through the silent chamber. Thank you for 200 years of cooperation. We hope someday you'll remember that diversity was never your weakness. It was your strength. Then the human delegation walked out of the council chambers for the last time. The 30-day countdown had begun. Marcus Thompson stood at the edge of the new Kepler terraforming site, watching his team pack up their equipment. The atmospheric processors hummed quietly in the distance, still working to maintain the delicate balance of gases that would let the Zolarians breathe comfortably when they arrived. The automated systems will keep running for about 6 months, Dr. Yuki Tanaka said, checking her tablet one final time. After that, she shrugged. The Zolarians will need to find someone else who understands atmospheric engineering in hostile environments. Marcus nodded. He had spent 3 days writing detailed instruction manuals and leaving them in the base computer. Everything the Zolarians would need to know about maintaining their new world was there, explained in simple terms. It wasn't his fault if no other species had bothered to learn this kind of work. Any word from other teams? Marcus asked. Captain Rodriguez finished evacuating his deep space mission yesterday, Yuki replied. Dr. Okafor's trade route teams are wrapping up their last escort runs through the Crimson Nebula. Captain Liu just finished mediating his final dispute between the Hive Confederation and the Lone Wolf Alliance. Marcus looked out at the green valleys one more time. This had been his life's work, turning dead worlds into living ones. Now he was walking away from it all because the galaxy had decided being human was a problem that needed fixing. Ready to go home? Yuki asked gently. Yeah, Marcus said. Let's go. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on hundreds of worlds. Human teams quietly finished their current projects and began the long journey back to Earth and the other human colonies. There were no angry speeches, No dramatic gestures. No attempts at sabotage or revenge. Humans simply left on Nexus Prime. Sarah Chun spent her final week as ambassador completing all her paperwork and transferring files to the Council archives. Every trade agreement, every diplomatic protocol, every crisis resolution, all of it, carefully documented and explained for whoever would try to take over human responsibilities. Elder Zix9 visited her office one last time. "This is madness," the crystal being said, their voice full of sadness. "The council is making a terrible mistake." "Perhaps," Sarah replied, sealing the last of her files. "But it's their mistake to make. We offered partnership. They wanted subjects. Those are two different things. Where will you go? What will humans do now?" Sarah looked out at the Great Plaza one final time. For 2 centuries, this had been humanity's window to the galaxy. Now it was just another alien city they were leaving behind. "The same thing we did before we met you," she said. "Explore, discover, build, dream. The galaxy is vast. Elder Zix9, there's room for many different kinds of civilizations among the stars. The Council expects you to reconsider?" Zix9 said hopefully. "Surely when the 30 days are over." "We won't," Sarah said simply. "Humans don't negotiate with threats to our basic nature. We've learned that lesson before in our own history. Sometimes the only winning move is not to play." Dr. Amara Okafor was one of the last to leave. Her job managing the Crimson Nebula trade routes was too important to abandon suddenly. Merchant ships from dozens of species depended on her team's navigation expertise to make it through the dangerous passage safely. She spent her final week training a replacement team from the crystalline hierarchy. They were good mathematicians and could calculate safe routes through the nebula's shifting magnetic fields. But they lacked the human instinct for when to break the rules, when to take risks, when to trust gut feelings over sensor readings. The automated beacon network should handle most situations, Amara explained to Crystal Commander Hex 9. But if anything unusual happens, new magnetic storms, pirate attacks, spatial anomalies, you'll need to adapt quickly. "We will follow established protocols," Hex 9 replied in their chiming voice. Amara nodded politely, though she knew the established protocols wouldn't be enough. The Crimson Nebula was unpredictable, requiring the kind of flexible thinking the Council wanted to eliminate from human minds. But that wasn't her problem anymore. "Good luck," she said sincerely, and meant it. Captain Liu Wei's final mediation session was perhaps the strangest farewell of all. He sat in a conference room with delegates from the Hive, Confederation, and the Lone Wolf Alliance, 2 species who had been bitter enemies until humans helped them find common ground. "We don't understand," said Drone Prime 7742 of the Hive. "Why are humans leaving? Did we do something wrong?" "Your species has been invaluable," added Lone Wolf Pack Leader Stormchaser. "You helped us see that cooperation doesn't mean losing our identity." Liu smiled sadly. "You didn't do anything wrong. But the Elder Council has decided that human nature is incompatible with galactic order. They want to change us into something more predictable." "That's insane," Stormchaser snarled. "Your unpredictability is what made you good mediators. You could think outside the patterns that trapped us for centuries. Will you reconsider?" Drone Prime 7742 asked. "The Collective could provide sanctuary worlds for your species. We would welcome human chaos in our space." "Thank you," Liu said, genuinely touched. "But this isn't about finding a safe place to hide. It's about principles. Either we're accepted as we are, or we're not. There's no middle ground on something this fundamental." The news of human withdrawal spread slowly through galactic communication networks. At first, many species didn't understand what was happening. Human teams were just gone. Projects left half-finished. Crisis response teams unreachable. Trade routes suddenly without management. On Nexus Prime, the council chambers buzzed with confused discussion. Some members had expected humans to back down at the last moment, to accept the biological modifications rather than face exile. Others had assumed the galaxy could function just fine without human interference. Elder species addressed the assembly with satisfaction. Order is being restored. The chaotic elements are removing themselves voluntarily. Soon we will return to the predictable stability our ancestors built. But Elder Quantum 7 was reviewing statistics on his private network. Shipping delays in the Crimson Nebula had already increased by 200%. 3 minor conflicts had erupted in sectors that usually had human peacekeeping teams. 2 terraforming projects had stalled because their human managers were gone, and no one else fully understood the complex atmospheric systems. The machine collectives leader kept these observations to himself for now. Perhaps the problems would resolve themselves once other species stepped up to fill human roles. On Earth, President Maria Santos stood before a joint session of the Global Parliament. The great chamber was packed with representatives from every human world, listening to her address about their species' future. "We returned to human space not in defeat, but in dignity," she said. "For 2 centuries, we shared our gifts with the galaxy. We prevented wars, opened new worlds, and built bridges between incompatible species. We did this because we believed diversity made us all stronger." She paused, looking out at the faces of her own people. The council disagreed. They decided our differences were problems to be solved rather than strengths to be celebrated. They asked us to choose between being human and being galactic citizens. That choice was easy to make. Applause filled the chamber, but Santos raised her hand for quiet. "This is not the end of human exploration. The galaxy is vast, full of wonders we haven't yet discovered. We'll continue to explore, to build, to dream. We'll do it as ourselves. Chaotic, emotional, unpredictable, adaptable humans." She smiled, and her next words carried hope despite the sadness of recent events. "And perhaps someday, the galaxy will realize that trying to eliminate differences only makes the universe a smaller, dimmer place. When that day comes, we'll still be here among the stars, ready to be partners again." The 30 days ended not with confrontation, but with silence. Human ships departed from their final stations across the galaxy, leaving behind detailed instructions, completed projects, and empty spaces that would soon prove far larger than anyone expected. The Great Withdrawal was complete. Now the galaxy would learn what it had truly lost. Elder Quantum 7 stared at the latest reports flooding into his systems. 6 months had passed since the humans left, and the statistics painted a disturbing picture. His mechanical mind processed the data with cold precision, but even he found the results troubling. The Crimson Nebula trade route had become a nightmare. Without human navigation teams, merchant ships were taking 300% longer to traverse the dangerous passage. 3 vessels had been lost to magnetic storms that human navigators would have easily avoided. Pirate attacks had increased by 800% as criminal organizations realized the trade route was no longer properly defended. Crystal Commander Hex 9 had done exactly what they promised, followed established protocols. The problem was that the Crimson Nebula didn't care about protocols. It was a living, changing thing that required intuition and quick thinking, qualities that humans possess naturally, but other species had to work hard to develop. The trade route situation requires immediate attention, Quantum 7 reported to the Council emergency session. Economic losses are approaching critical levels. Elder species rippled with annoyance. Surely a simple navigation problem can be solved with better technology. The technology exists, Quantum 7 replied. The humans left complete records of their methods. The issue is not equipment. It is approach. Human navigators made decisions based on incomplete data and emotional intuition. They took calculated risks that other species find uncomfortable. On the border between the Hive Confederation and Lone Wolf Alliance, the carefully maintained peace was cracking. Without Captain Liu and his mediation team, old tensions were rising again. The two species had learned to cooperate over the past decades. But that cooperation had required constant human intervention to smooth over cultural differences. Drone Prime 7742 sat in his collective consciousness chamber, feeling the growing anxiety of his billions of connected minds. The Lone Wolves had resumed their aggressive expansion into disputed territory. Without humans to find creative compromise solutions, both species were falling back on their ancient patterns. The individual minds grow hostile again, reported Drone Secondary 3391. They claim we violate territorial agreements with our collective settlements. Their claims are factually incorrect, 7742 replied. But they lack the patience for proper explanation. The human mediators understood how to translate collective speak into individual speak. Meanwhile, Lone Wolf pack leader Stormchaser paced restlessly in his command den. His people were warriors who valued personal freedom above all else. The Hive's collective settlements still looked like invasion attempts to most lone wolves. Despite years of human-mediated understanding, the bug mines spread across 3 more systems, reported his lieutenant Clawstriker. They say it's legal under the old agreements, but it feels wrong. Stormchaser snarled in frustration. Captain Liu always found ways to explain their perspective that made sense to us. Without him, we just see enemies expanding into our space. Both species had sent requests to the Council for new mediators. But none of the assigned diplomats understood how to bridge such fundamental differences in thinking. The Crystalline Hierarchy mediation team tried to solve everything with pure logic. The Aquatic Union team got lost in emotional currents they couldn't navigate. The Machine Collective Mediation Unit processed every dispute as a simple resource allocation problem. None of them could do what Liu had done, translate not just language, but entire ways of thinking. The terraforming crisis on New Kepler was even worse. The Zilarians had arrived to find their new world slowly dying. Without Marcus Thompson's team to maintain the delicate atmospheric balance, the terraforming systems had begun to fail in ways no one had anticipated. Dr. Yuki's instruction manuals were comprehensive, but they couldn't account for every variable on a living world. Unexpected weather patterns had disrupted the gas processors. Native microorganisms had evolved to attack the imported plant life. The magnetic field generators needed constant adjustment that required the kind of intuitive understanding Marcus's team had developed over years of experience. We followed every procedure exactly, reported Zilarian Chief Scientist Geltel to the Council. But the world changing requires more than procedures. It requires understanding that comes from experience. The humans had learned to feel the planet's moods, to sense when systems were stressed before their instruments showed problems. The Zilarian colony ships sat in orbit around their dying world, waiting for solutions that might never come. Thousands of families who had given up everything for a new star watched their dreams literally suffocate in the poisoned air below. But the real disaster came from the Void Sector. Commander Jake Rodriguez had been leading deep space exploration missions into that dangerous region for 15 years. His teams had mapped hazards, established emergency protocols, and learned to recognize the warning signs of the mysterious phenomena that plagued the area. When they left, they had filed complete reports with the Council. The reports weren't enough. The Andromedian research vessel Solar Harmony entered the Void Sector 2 months after the human withdrawal. They followed every protocol Jake's teams had established, but they lacked the hard-won experience that came from actually working in that nightmare of twisted space and time. When the quantum storms hit, they tried to follow standard procedure and retreat to a safe distance. But the void sector didn't have standard dangers. The storms chased them, growing stronger as they fed on the ship's energy signature. An experienced human crew would have shut down all non-essential systems and gone completely dark. The Andromedians kept their lights on and tried to fight their way out. The Solar Harmony was found 3 weeks later, drifting dead in space with her crew turned into crystalline statues. The rescue teams found the ship's logs, showing how the crew had followed every rule perfectly, and died because the void sector required you to break the rules at exactly the right moments. This is the second ship we've lost to phenomena that human crews handled routinely, reported Captain Voidwalker of the rescue fleet. The written procedures don't capture the intuitive understanding needed to survive in unstable space. Elder Zix-9 watched these reports with growing alarm. They had tried to warn their colleagues about the consequences of losing human cooperation, but their voice had been drowned out by the Elder Council's certainty. Perhaps we should reconsider our position, Zix-9 suggested during a private council session. The humans offered valuable services that are proving difficult to replace. Elder Species's form rippled with irritation. Temporary disruptions. Other species will adapt to fill these roles. The galaxy functioned for millions of years without human interference, but not with human-level complexity, Zix-9 pointed out. The humans didn't just do work that existed before. They created new possibilities. Trade routes through areas others considered impassable. Diplomatic solutions between species others thought incompatible. Terraforming techniques that opened worlds others had given up on. Elder Aquaprime flowed forward. You suggest we compromise our principles for convenience. I suggest we examine what our principles have cost us. Zix-9 replied quietly. The examination was more painful than anyone expected. Economic analysis showed that human withdrawal had cost the galaxy approximately 2.3 trillion credits in the first 6 months alone. Lost trade, failed projects, military spending to handle conflicts that humans had prevented. It all added up to a staggering figure. More importantly, the rate of discovery and innovation had slowed dramatically. Humans hadn't just done existing work efficiently. They had been the galaxy's primary source of new ideas, new approaches, new solutions to old problems. Without them, galactic civilization was running on momentum from past achievements. We're not moving forward anymore, Quantum 7 reported to a closed council session. We're simply maintaining what already exists. The rate of technological advancement has decreased by 67%. New worlds open for colonization, 0. New diplomatic frameworks established, 0. New trade corridors discovered, 0. Elder species remain defiant. Stability is more valuable than chaotic progress. Tell that to the Zilarians watching their world die, Zix-9 replied sharply. Tell that to the families of the Solar Harmony crew. Tell that to the merchants losing fortunes in the Crimson Nebula. But the real crisis was just beginning. Long-range sensors had detected something that made all previous problems seem small. A massive fleet was approaching from outside the galaxy, ships of unknown design moving with clear hostile intent. The Void Swarm had arrived. First contact protocols existed. Of course, the galaxy had procedures for meeting new species, established diplomatic frameworks for initial communication attempts. Elder species activated these systems with confidence, certain that galactic civilizations, ancient wisdom would handle this new challenge. Void Swarm's response to diplomatic overtures was simple. They destroyed the messenger. probe and accelerated toward inhabited systems. They appear immune to our standard diplomatic approaches, reported the first contact team leader. Request permission to escalate to advanced protocols. The advanced protocols failed too. And the military response protocols. And the economic incentive protocols. Every approach the galaxy had developed over millions of years of careful order was useless against. The council chambers had never been so chaotic. Elder Specious watched his carefully ordered galaxy crumble as reports flooded in from across 3 star systems. The Void Swarm had broken through every defense, adapted to every weapon, and countered every strategy the combined galactic fleets could deploy. They've taken the Helix sector, reported Admiral Crystal Storm of the Joint Defense Force. Our ships can't predict their movement patterns. They change tactics faster than our computers can analyze. What about the Kepler defense grid? Elder Aqua Prime asked desperately. Bypassed completely, Crystal Storm replied. They didn't attack it head-on like our models predicted. They came from 7 different directions simultaneously, using ship configurations we'd never seen before. By the time we realized what was happening, they were already past our outer defenses. Elder Quantum 7 processed battlefield data with mechanical precision, but even his advanced systems couldn't make sense of the enemy's chaotic approach. The Void Swarm appears to operate without central coordination. Each ship group acts independently, yet they achieve perfect synchronized results. It should be impossible. It's not impossible, said a quiet voice from the back of the chamber. It's human. All eyes turned to Elder Zix9, who had been silent through most of the emergency session. What do you mean? Elder Specious demanded. The Void Swarm fights like humans, Zix9 explained. Independent thinking. Rapid adaptation. Emotional decision-making that appears random but achieves strategic goals. They're using every trait we tried to eliminate from human nature. The chamber fell silent, except for the distant rumble of emergency sirens as the defense fleet scrambled to respond to another Void Swarm breakthrough. Elder Specious's metallic form had lost its usual confidence. Are you suggesting we contact the humans? I'm suggesting we face reality, Zix9 replied. We need someone who understands chaos. Someone who can think outside our established patterns. Someone who can match the Void Swarm's unpredictability with their own. The humans will never help us, Elder Aqua Prime flowed nervously. We exiled them. We demanded they change their fundamental nature or leave. Then perhaps, said a new voice, it's time for new leadership. The speaker was Delegate Trill9 of the Centauri Collective, one of the younger species that had joined the Council within the last 1,000 years. Behind her stood dozens of representatives from other junior species, all looking grim and determined. What is the meaning of this interruption? Elder Specious demanded. A vote of no confidence, Trill9 replied simply. The Elder Council has led us to disaster. Your policies drove away our most valuable allies and left us defenseless against threats you couldn't imagine. We demand new leadership and immediate contact with humanity. The chamber erupted in arguments. Elder species protested the unprecedented challenge to their authority. Junior species demanded change. Ancient alliances cracked under the pressure of immediate crisis. The rebellion was swift and decisive. When the final vote was tallied, the old council structure had collapsed. Elder Specious and his supporters retained their positions as honored advisors. But real power shifted to a new coalition of younger species who had always valued human partnership. The first act of the new leadership was to send a message to Earth. President Maria Santos received the transmission in her office overlooking the rebuilt spaceport at New Geneva. 3 years had passed since the Great Withdrawal, and humanity had used that time well. New colonies had been established in unexplored sectors. Human ships had pushed further into unknown space than ever before. Technologies had advanced in directions that served human needs rather than galactic. Standardization. The message was simple. The galaxy needs your help. Will you listen? Scientists convened an emergency session of the Global Parliament, but the debate was surprisingly brief. Humanity had spent 3 years watching galactic civilizations struggle with problems they could have easily solved. The news of the Void Swarm invasion had reached human space months ago, along with reports of the galaxy's failed response. They're asking for our help, Santos announced to the assembly. Not as subjects who need to be fixed, but as partners who bring unique capabilities. Captain Marcus Thompson, now Director of Colonial Operations, stood to address the assembly. The galaxy has learned what we always knew. Diversity is strength, not weakness. But we need guarantees this won't happen again. Sarah Chun, who had spent the last 3 years writing humanity's new policies toward galactic civilization, took the podium next. I propose we help them, she said, but not as members of their council, as equals in a new kind of alliance, one based on mutual respect rather than hierarchical control. The vote was unanimous. The human response fleet that arrived in galactic space was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. These weren't the same ships that had left 3 years ago. Human technology had evolved in isolation, taking paths that galactic science had never explored. The ships were smaller, faster, more adaptable, designed by minds that thought in terms of possibility rather than procedure. Commander Jake Rodriguez had volunteered to lead the mission. Despite his years of peaceful retirement on Mars, his experience in the Void sector made him uniquely qualified to understand the enemy they faced. We're not here to save you, he announced at his first briefing with galactic commanders. We're here to work with you, but we do this our way, with our methods, following human tactical doctrine. Admiral Crystal Storm bristled at the apparent presumption. Your methods are chaotic and unpredictable. Exactly, Jake smiled. So is the enemy. Fight chaos with order, and you lose. Fight chaos with organized chaos, and you might win. The first joint human galactic operation against the Void Swarm was a revelation. Human ships didn't follow the careful formation patterns that galactic doctrine demanded. Instead, they scattered across the battlefield like wild animals, each group acting independently while somehow maintaining perfect coordination. When the Void Swarm tried their usual trick of rapidly changing tactics, they found human commanders changing even faster. Every time the aliens adapted to one approach, human crews switched to something completely different. How are you coordinating without central command? Admiral Crystal Storm asked Jake during the battle. We're not, Jake replied, watching his tactical display with satisfaction. Each ship commander is making their own decisions based on what they see in front of them. But we all understand the same basic principles. Stay flexible, support your teammates, and never do what the enemy expects. The battle was chaos, but it was human chaos, controlled, purposeful, devastating to enemies who couldn't predict what came next. For the first time since the invasion began, the Void Swarm found themselves outmaneuvered and confused. The victory at the Helix sector marked the turning point of the war. Over the following months, joint human galactic forces pushed the Void Swarm back system by system. The aliens' adaptive tactics meant nothing against opponents who could adapt even faster. But the real victory wasn't military. It was diplomatic. The new Galactic Council had dissolved entirely, replaced by something unprecedented, the Stellar Confederation. Instead of a hierarchy with elder species ruling over younger ones, the Confederation was a voluntary alliance of equals. Each member species contributed according to their strengths, but no one tried to control or standardize the others. Sarah Chun stood once again before a galactic assembly, but this time the setting was different. Instead of the rigid council chambers on Nexus Prime, the Confederation met on rotating worlds in facilities designed by different species. Today's session was on New Geneva, in a building that reflected human architectural principles: open, adaptive, designed to change based on the needs of its users. The Confederation represents a new approach to galactic civilization, Sarah announced to delegates from hundreds of species. Not unity through uniformity, but strength through diversity. She gestured to the mixed crews working outside the assembly hall: humans, crystalline beings, machine collective units, aquatic union members, all working together on projects that use the best capabilities of each species. The humans learned to terraform impossible worlds because we evolved on a planet that kept trying to kill us. The crystalline hierarchy can calculate complex mathematics because their minds work like living computers. The machine collective builds perfect mechanisms because precision is their nature. The aquatic union understands emotional currents because they live in harmony with their environment. Sarah paused, looking out at the diverse assembly. The old council tried to eliminate these differences, to standardize us all into something safe and predictable. But predictable civilizations can't handle unpredictable challenges. The Void Swarm proved that. Elder Zix-9, now serving as an honored advisor rather than a ruler, chimed their agreement. We thought diversity was chaos that needed to be controlled. We learned instead that diversity is the order that emerges from many different strengths working together. The Confederation's first major project was ambitious: the complete reconstruction of galactic civilizations. Approach to exploration, diplomacy, and defense. Human teams returned to their old roles, but with new partners and new respect for what they brought to the table. Marcus Thompson found himself back on New Kepler,